You there, come on up.
The rain came out of nowhere that Wednesday evening. One minute the sky was clear. The next, water was pouring down like someone had turned on a giant faucet above the city. Daniel ducked under the first awning he could find, watching other people scatter in different directions, some laughing, others cursing their luck. He stood there for a moment, water dripping from his hair onto his shoulders. His phone buzzed in his pocket. Another text from his coworkers back at the hotel, asking if he wanted to grab dinner at the restaurant downstairs. He ignored it. The thought of sitting in that sterile hotel dining room, making small talk about spreadsheets and quarterly reports, made him want to walk right back into the rain. The awning he'd chosen belonged to a small jazz club. The Blue Note, according to the faded sign above the door. Soft music drifted out every time someone opened the door to go inside. Daniel had walked past places like this 1,000 times in his life, always wondering what it was like inside, but never actually going in. Tonight, with rain pelting the sidewalk and nothing but an empty hotel room waiting for him, he figured why not. Inside, the club was smaller than he expected. Maybe 50 people scattered around small tables, all facing a tiny stage at the far end. The lighting was dim and warm, the kind that made everyone look softer around the edges. A few candles flickered on tables. The air smelled like coffee and old wood and something else he couldn't quite name. History, maybe. Daniel slipped into a seat in the back corner, as far from the stage as he could get. A waitress appeared almost immediately, and he ordered coffee even though it was already 7 in the evening. He wasn't planning to sleep well tonight anyway. He never did in hotel rooms. On stage, 4 musicians were in the middle of a song. An older woman with gray streaks in her dark hair swayed gently as she played the saxophone. Next to her, a man with thick glasses kept steady rhythm on the drums. The upright bass player looked like he might be the leader, the way he smiled and nodded at the others while he played. And there was a young guy on guitar, couldn't be more than 25, eyes closed in concentration. Daniel watched them without really listening at first. His mind was somewhere else entirely. Tomorrow, he had another full day of training sessions for the company's new accounting software. 8 hours of watching someone click through screens and talk about data integration. He'd been doing this kind of work for almost 15 years now, and lately, every day felt exactly like the one before it. The coffee arrived, hot and strong. He wrapped his hands around the cup and let the warmth sink into his fingers. Outside, he could still hear the rain hammering against the windows. Inside, the music filled all the quiet spaces. His foot started tapping without him deciding to do it. Then his fingers joined in, drumming lightly against the wooden table. The rhythm was infectious, the kind that gets into your bones before your brain catches up. He didn't even realize he was doing it until the song ended, and he noticed his hand had been moving the whole time. The bass player stepped up to the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Jerome, and we're so glad you're here with us tonight." His voice was warm and rich, the kind of voice that made you want to keep listening. That was Autumn Leaves, and if you enjoyed it, wait until you hear what's coming next. The audience clapped politely. A few people whistled. Daniel took another sip of his coffee and settled deeper into his chair. This wasn't bad at all. Better than the hotel, that was for sure. Better than thinking about tomorrow as training session or next week as reports, or the promotion he didn't get last month because someone younger and hungrier wanted it more. The band launched into another song, something upbeat that got a few people nodding along. Daniel found his gaze drifting around the room. An elderly couple sat near the front, holding hands on top of the table. A group of college kids clustered around a table in the middle, splitting a dessert between them. A woman about his age sat alone 2 tables over, writing in a notebook between sips of wine. Everyone looked so present, so there. Like they weren't thinking about tomorrow, or yesterday, or anywhere else, but this room, this music, this moment. When was the last time Daniel had felt that way? Really present, really alive, not just going through the motions? The saxophone player was doing something incredible, her fingers flying over the keys, pulling notes out of the instrument that seemed to tell a whole story without a single word. The drummer supported her with soft, steady rhythms that felt like a heartbeat. Daniel's fingers kept tapping against the table. Complex patterns, following the bass line, then the melody, then improvising little flourishes that only he could hear. His body remembered what his mind had tried to forget. Between songs, Jerome told stories about the music they were playing, where the songs came from, who wrote them, what they meant. He talked about the history of the club, too, how it had been standing in this same spot for 47 years, how legends had played on that very stage, how the walls had soaked up so much music they probably hummed even when the place was empty. Music isn't just sound, Jerome said at one point, his hand resting on his bass like it was an old friend. It's conversation. It's truth-telling. It's the thing we reach for when regular words just aren't enough. Daniel felt something twist in his chest. He took another drink of coffee to wash it down. The rain continued outside, steady and relentless. Inside the Blue Note, time seemed to move differently. Songs flowed into each other. The candles burned lower. Daniel's coffee grew cold in the cup, but he didn't order another one. He just sat there, fingers tapping, foot keeping time, something old and forgotten, stirring in a place he'd locked away years ago. He had no idea that in just a few minutes, Jerome would scan the crowd with mischievous eyes, that those eyes would land on him in his back corner, that a simple question would crack open the door he'd been keeping closed for over a decade. For now, he was just a stranger in a jazz club on a rainy Wednesday night, trying not to think about the life he'd built or the one he'd given up. Just listening, just tapping his fingers against an old wooden table, just breathing in the music and the moment and the strange, unexpected comfort of being completely alone in a room full of people. Jerome set down his bass and walked to the center of the stage, a grin spreading across his face, the kind of grin that meant something was about to happen. Daniel noticed a few people in the audience sit up straighter, like they knew what was coming. "All right, folks," Jerome said, his voice carrying easily through the small room. "We've got ourselves a special tradition here at the Blue Note. Every Wednesday night when it rains, we do something a little different. We call it the Stranger's Solo." A nervous laugh rippled through the crowd. Daniel saw the woman with the notebook close it quickly and shake her head as if telling the universe she was not available for whatever this was. The college kids started playfully pushing each other, daring one another to volunteer. "Here's how it works," Jerome continued, clearly enjoying himself. "I pick someone from the audience. Could be anybody. And that lucky person gets to come up here and make some music with us. Just one song. Nothing fancy. Just play from the heart." Daniel's stomach dropped. He suddenly became very interested in his empty coffee cup, staring into it like it held the secrets of the universe. This was exactly the kind of thing he'd spent the last 15 years avoiding. Attention, spontaneity, risk, anything that couldn't be planned, calculated, and safely predicted. "Now I know what you're thinking," Jerome said. "Some of you are thinking, please not me, and some of you are thinking, pick me, pick me. But here's the thing about music. It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest." Daniel felt his pulse quickening. He casually glanced at the exit, calculating how weird it would be if he just stood up and left right now. Pretty weird, he decided. And the rain was still coming down hard outside. He was trapped. Jerome started scanning the audience, his eyes moving from table to table. People reacted in different ways. Some smiled and waved. Others suddenly found their phones incredibly interesting. The elderly couple near the front held each other a little tighter, both clearly hoping to avoid being chosen. "Let me see here," Jerome mused, drawing out the moment. "I'm looking for someone special tonight. Someone who's been keeping time with the music. Someone whose body knows the rhythm, even if their mind forgot." Daniel's fingers stopped mid-tap. He hadn't even realized he'd been doing it again. His hand was flat against the table now, frozen in place like maybe if he stayed completely still, he'd become invisible. It didn't work. Jerome's eyes locked onto him. That grin got even wider. "You. Yes, you in the back corner. The gentleman who's been tapping out our bass line for the last half hour. What's your name, friend?" Every head in the room turned to look at Daniel. 50 pairs of eyes. 50 strangers suddenly very interested in the man who'd been trying so hard to blend into the shadows. His face went hot. His throat went dry. For a second, he forgot how to form words. "Daniel," he managed to say, his voice coming out quieter than he intended. "Daniel," Jerome repeated, like they were old friends. "Daniel, my man, I've been watching those fingers. You've got rhythm in your bones. Come on up here and play with us." Daniel shook his head quickly. "I appreciate it, but I don't think that's a good idea. I haven't played in years. I'd just mess up your show." "Haven't played in years?" Jerome repeated, nodding like Daniel had just confirmed something important. "But you did play. I knew it. What instrument?" "Piano, but really, Perfect. Our regular piano player called in sick tonight. See that beautiful Steinway sitting there all lonely? It's practically begging for someone to give it some love." The saxophone player chimed in, her voice warm and encouraging. "Come on up, honey. We're all friends here." No judgment, just music. The audience started clapping. Not demanding, but supportive. The kind of clapping that said we're all in this together. A few people called out encouragement. "You got this." Someone shouted from the middle of the room. The woman who'd been writing in her notebook gave him a thumbs up. Daniel felt something rising in his chest. Panic, maybe, or something else. Something that felt dangerously close to excitement. His legs started moving before his brain agreed to it, like his body had made a decision his mind was still arguing about. The walk to the stage felt endless. Every step echoed in his head. "What are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing?" He was a financial analyst. He wore button-down shirts and reviewed spreadsheets. He hadn't touched a piano since the week after his father's funeral, when he'd sold the old upright that had lived in their family room his entire childhood. The piano his dad had taught him to play on. The piano that had felt too painful to keep. But his feet kept moving. Jerome met him at the stage steps, extending a hand to help him up. "There we go. See? That wasn't so hard." Up close, Jerome's eyes were kind. Not mocking, not challenging. Just genuinely happy to have Daniel there. The piano sat stage left, glossy and black under the warm lights. A Steinway Model M, if Daniel's memory was right. He dreamed about playing one of these when he was younger. Never thought he actually would. He sat down on the bench slowly. The leather was worn smooth from years of other people sitting in this exact spot, other people's moments of truth. His hands hovered over the keys, not quite touching. They looked like strangers' hands. Older than he remembered. More tired. "What are we playing?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jerome thought for a moment, studying Daniel's face. "You know, Round Midnight?" Daniel's breath caught. Of course. Of course it would be that song. The song he'd learned at 17. The song he'd played over and over during the hardest year of his life, when music was the only language that made sense. The song he'd played at his father's wake, badly, his fingers shaking so hard he could barely hit the right notes. "I know it," he said. "Beautiful." Jerome walked back to his bass. The drummer gave Daniel a reassuring nod. The saxophone player smiled at him. her instrument ready. They were all waiting. The audience was waiting. The whole room seemed to hold its breath. "Just feel it," Jerome said softly. "There's no wrong notes in jazz, only opportunities. When you're ready, we'll follow you." Daniel's hands were shaking now. 13 years of carefully constructed walls. 13 years of being practical, responsible, safe. 13 years of not letting himself feel too much, or want too much, or remember too much. All of it was pressing down on him in this moment. His finger touched middle C, just resting there. Not pressing down yet, not making any sound. Just touching. Remembering what it felt like to be someone who played music. Someone who believed in beauty instead of just security. Someone who hadn't given up. The room waited. Jerome nodded encouragingly. The rain drummed against the windows. Daniel's fingers moved through the chord progressions, and somewhere behind him, he heard the saxophone join in. Soft at first, weaving around his melody like a conversation. The woman was playing the harmony, giving his lonely melody a companion. Then the bass came in, Jerome's deep notes grounding everything, holding it all together. The drums followed with brushes instead of sticks, making a sound like wind through trees. They were following his lead. He was leading them. When had that happened? When had he stopped being terrified and started just playing? His right hand ventured into improvisation, taking the familiar melody and bending it, exploring it, asking it questions. What if I go here instead? What if I pause here? What if I make this note last just a little longer? Let it breathe. The other musicians adjusted with him, like they could read his mind. Or maybe this was just what music was supposed to be. A conversation where nobody had to explain themselves. Where everyone just understood. Daniel thought about the last 13 years. The safe job. The reliable paycheck. The apartment that looked like it came from a furniture catalog because he'd never bothered to make it feel like home. The relationships that fizzled out because he never let anyone get too close. The hobbies he didn't have because he was always working or too tired from working. The life he built that felt more like a waiting room than an actual life. His fingers pressed harder into the keys. The music got more intense. Not angry exactly, but honest. Raw. All the things he'd been holding in for over a decade started pouring out through his hands. The fear, the regret, the crushing weight of responsibilities he'd taken on too young. The dreams he'd packed away in boxes and shoved to the back of his mind's closet. But something else came through too. Something he hadn't expected. Hope. The memory of his father teaching him his first chord. The pure joy of making something beautiful out of nothing but air and vibration and feeling. The person he used to be before life got hard and scary. That person was still in there somewhere. Still knew how to feel. Still knew how to create. The saxophone player took a solo, and Daniel supported her with steady chords, listening to where she was going, following her story. She was saying something different than what he'd been saying. Something lighter. Like she was reminding him that sadness wasn't the only truth. That there was still beauty in the world. Still reasons to keep going. When she finished, Daniel took the melody back. But it was different now. Softer. More gentle with itself. The notes weren't asking questions anymore. They were accepting, forgiving, letting go. He could feel the room around him now, even with his eyes closed. He could sense 50 people breathing together, listening together, feeling together. This was what Jerome had meant. Music wasn't just sound. It was connection. It was being human in front of other humans and trusting them to handle it with care. Daniel built toward the ending, his fingers finding the final phrases. The other musicians stayed with him, knowing exactly when to get quieter, when to pull back, when to let the piano speak alone again. His left hand walked down the bass notes, while his right hand held onto the melody like saying goodbye to an old friend. The last chord. He let it ring out, sustaining the pedal, letting all those vibrations mix together in the air. Then slowly, Carefully, he lifted his hands from the keys. Silence. For 3 full seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The note faded into nothing, and the room just sat there, suspended in whatever spell the music had cast. Then someone started clapping. Then everyone started clapping. Daniel opened his eyes, and the world rushed back in. The warm lights. The candles on tables. 50 people on their feet, applauding like he'd just done something incredible. Some of them had tears on their faces. The elderly couple near the front were holding each other tight. The college kids were cheering. The woman with the notebook was clapping so hard her hands must have hurt. Daniel looked down at his hands on his lap. They were shaking. His whole body was shaking. He felt like he'd just run a marathon or survived something dangerous, but also like he'd just woken up from a very long sleep. Jerome appeared beside him, gripping his shoulder. "Brother," he said, and his voice was thick with emotion. "Where have you been hiding that?" Daniel couldn't answer. His throat was too tight. He hadn't cried in years, had trained himself not to, but right now he was very close. "That wasn't just playing," a saxophone player said, "coming over to stand by the piano. That was truth. Pure, honest truth. You just told us your whole story without saying a single word." A man from the audience approached the stage, probably in his 70s, with kind eyes behind his. "Young man," he said, "I lost my son 5 years ago. That song, the way you played it, that's exactly what grief sounds like. Thank you for putting it into something beautiful." More people were coming up, wanting to say something, to share how the music had touched them. A woman told him it reminded her of her wedding day. Another said it was the first time she'd felt anything in months. A college kid just shook his hand and said, "Dude, that was insane," with genuine awe in his voice. Daniel stumbled back to his table in a daze. Someone had brought him fresh coffee. He wrapped his hands around the cup but couldn't drink it. He was too overwhelmed, too full of feelings he didn't know what to do with. The rain outside had stopped. He only noticed because someone mentioned it. When had that happened? While he was playing? Before? The windows were still streaked with water, but the drumming sound was gone. Jerome and the band were taking a break, mingling with the audience. But they kept looking over at Daniel with smiles. Like he was part of something now. Like he belonged. Daniel pulled out his phone. His fingers hovered over his mother's contact. When was the last time he'd called her? Really called her, not just a quick text on her birthday? 3 weeks ago? 4? He pressed dial before he could talk himself out of it. The phone rang 3 times before his mother answered. Daniel could hear the television in the background, some game show she probably wasn't really watching. Just background noise to fill the empty house. "Daniel, is everything okay?" Her voice had that edge of worry mothers never lose. A phone call at 9 on a Wednesday night meant something was wrong in her world. "Yeah, Mom. Everything's fine. He paused, watching Jerome laugh with some audience members across the room. "I just wanted to call. Hear your voice." Daniel took a breath, and then he pressed down. The note rang out clear and pure. A single E-flat that filled the small club like it had been waiting years to be heard. Daniel felt it vibrate through his fingertip, up his arm, into his chest. He'd forgotten this feeling. The way a piano doesn't just make sound but speaks, really speaks. For a moment, that was all there was. Just that one note hanging in the air. And his other fingers found their way to the keys, almost on their own. The opening melody of Round Midnight came back like a memory his hands had kept safe while his mind tried to forget. Slow and lonely at first, questioning, like someone walking through a dark room, feeling for the walls. His eyes closed without him deciding to close them. Suddenly, he wasn't in a jazz club anymore. He was 17 again, sitting at the old upright in his parents' living room. His father was in the kitchen making tea, humming along to whatever Daniel was practicing. The house smelled like dinner cooking and old books and safety. The melody grew stronger, more confident. His left hand joined in with the bass notes, deep and steady like a heartbeat. He'd practiced this song hundreds of times back then. Played it so much his mother used to joke that she heard it in her sleep. But he'd never really understood it until the night of his father's funeral, when he'd come home to an empty house and played it alone in the dark, crying so hard he could barely see the keys. That's when the song had finally made sense. When he understood what Thelonious Monk was trying to say with those haunting, beautiful notes. It was about loss, about loneliness, about the quiet moments around midnight when you can't sleep and all your thoughts come flooding in, about missing someone so much it physically hurts. There was a moment of silence. Then, softer now. Well, that's nice, sweetheart. I'm glad you did. How's the conference going? It's fine. Boring, actually. But something happened tonight. He took a breath. I played piano, Mom, at a jazz club, in front of people. Another silence, longer this time. When she spoke again, her voice was trembling. You played? Really played? Really played. Round midnight. Dad's favorite. He heard her breath catch. Oh, Daniel. She was crying now. He could tell even though she was trying to hide it. He would have been so proud. I'm so proud. What made you do it? I don't really know. They just called me up, and I couldn't say no. Or maybe I didn't want to say no. I forgot how much I missed it, Mom. How much I gave up. You didn't give up anything, honey. You did what you needed to do. What we all needed you to do after your father passed. You kept us afloat. But maybe I stayed practical for too long. Maybe I forgot there was supposed to be more to life than just surviving. His mother was quiet for a moment. He could picture her in the living room, probably sitting in Dad's old recliner like she always did. Your father used to worry about that, you know. Before he got sick, he'd watch you practice for hours, and he'd say to me, that boy has got something special. We have to make sure the world doesn't squeeze it out of him. Daniel felt his throat tighten. I wish I could tell him I'm sorry, that I didn't mean to let it go. I just didn't know how to hold on to it and hold everything else together at the same time. Baby, you don't have anything to be sorry for. But maybe it's not too late to pick it back up. Maybe this is life giving you another chance. They talked for another 20 minutes. Really talked, not just the surface-level check-ins they'd fallen into over the years. She told him about the community garden she'd been thinking about joining. He told her about how empty his apartment felt. She admitted she still played his father's old jazz records sometimes. He promised to visit soon. Really visit, not just a quick weekend where he spent half the time answering work emails. When he finally hung up, the band was getting ready to play another set. Jerome caught his eye and waved him over. Daniel walked up to the stage, feeling less shaky than before, but still not quite steady. Man, I can't thank you enough for that, Jerome said, his hand on Daniel's shoulder again. That's what this place is all about. Real moments, real people, real music. You gave everyone in here a gift tonight. I think maybe they gave me one too, Daniel said. Listen, we're here every Wednesday night. You should come back. Play with us again. We could use a piano player who actually has soul. Daniel smiled. I live 3 hours away. I'm only here for work. So, 3 hours isn't that far. Not for something that matters. Jerome pulled a card from his pocket. Here's my number. You think about it. Doors always open. Daniel took the card, ran his thumb over the embossed lettering. I will. I really will. Back at his hotel an hour later, Daniel did something he hadn't done in years. Instead of opening his laptop to prep for tomorrow's sessions, instead of checking his work emails or reviewing his notes, he just sat on the edge of the bed in the quiet. The room felt different than it had that morning. Or maybe he felt different. Like something inside him had shifted, settled into a new position. Like a bone that had been slightly out of place for years, finally popping back where it belonged. He opened his laptop, but not for work. He searched for piano teachers in his hometown, found 3 that had good reviews and evening availability. He bookmarked their websites. Then he searched for used pianos for sale. Uprights, digitals, anything. Just to see what was out there. What it would cost to have that back in his life. The numbers surprised him. It was affordable. Not easy, but possible. He'd been spending more than that on takeout every month because he was too tired to cook. Too numb to care what he ate or where his money went or whether he was actually living or just existing. His phone buzzed. A text from his boss about tomorrow's meeting. Daniel looked at it, felt the familiar weight settling back onto his shoulders. The real world demanding his attention, reminding him of responsibilities and schedules and the reasonable life he'd built. But for the first time in 13 years, that weight felt like a choice instead of a prison sentence. He texted back a simple acknowledgement, then put the phone face down on the nightstand. Tomorrow, he'd sit through the training. He'd take notes and ask appropriate questions and do his job. But maybe he'd also start asking himself different questions. Like what would happen if he looked for work in the city, closer to the Blue Note? Or what if he negotiated to work 4 days a week instead of 5? Or what if he just decided that being good at something didn't mean he had to do it forever? That night, Daniel dreamed about music for the first time in over a decade. Not anxious dreams about forgotten performances or broken instruments. Just simple, good dreams about sitting at a piano, his father beside him, showing him a new chord. In the dream, his father smiled and said, "Keep going. You're getting there." And Daniel believed him. 3 months later, Daniel put in his notice at the accounting firm. His coworkers thought he was crazy. His boss tried to convince him to stay with a raise and a promotion. But Daniel had already made up his mind. He found a small apartment in the city, within walking distance of the Blue Note, got a part-time job doing bookkeeping for small businesses, enough to pay the bills, but not enough to consume his life. Used the rest of his time to relearn what he'd forgotten and remember who he'd been. 6 months after that rainy Wednesday, he was teaching piano lessons 3 afternoons a week at the community center. Mostly kids, but some adults too. People who'd given up their dreams and were trying to find their way back. He understood them in a way other teachers couldn't. He knew what it cost to walk away, and he knew what it took to come back. Every Wednesday night, rain or shine, he played at the Blue Note, sometimes as part of the regular band, sometimes just sitting in for a few songs. And whenever Jerome did the stranger's solo tradition, calling someone nervous and unprepared up to the stage, Daniel would watch from his piano bench and remember. He'd remember being that stranger. Remember thinking his life was set, unchangeable, already decided. Remember one single note that cracked everything open and let the light back in. And he'd play a little softer during those moments, giving the new stranger space to find their own voice. Space to be scared and do it anyway. Space to discover that it's never too late to choose differently. That you're never too far gone to find your way home. Because sometimes all it takes is one invitation. One moment of courage. One note that changes everything. The room would fill with music, and Daniel would close his eyes and feel grateful. Not just for the second chance, but for finally being brave enough to take it.